Okay.
Hello, everyone. This is Dane Ciolino along with Ernie Svenson, and today on this broadcast, we're very pleased to be joined by Alexander Benikov, and I'm holding up his book that we have asked everyone taking this course to get from Wolters Kluwer. I still call them Aspen, but I guess it's a different publisher now. Obviously, Aspen and Wolters Kluwer is one of the more prestigious publishers of law books, and Alex has written a book, of course, called Starting a Law Practice and Professionalism for New Lawyers, and he's kind enough to join us today to talk to us a little bit about the book, to give us a little background about his practice, why he wrote the book, and for Ernie and I to ask him some questions about our reactions on reading the book. So, Alex, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Alex, first, just a little background on you. I'm meeting you and talking to you for the first time. We've swapped emails, and first thing that strikes me is I'm old with gray hair and you're not.
I feel older.
How long have you been out practicing?
I'll tell you, I'm 32. I graduated in '09 when I was, 5 years ago. I can't do math very well. But I went pretty much straight through. I went to grad school too and graduated, and then went to Cooley in Michigan and finished '09 and hung out my proverbial shingle.
So you have been a practicing lawyer for 6 years, and you started out as a solo practitioner?
Yeah, I'll be starting my 6th year in August if my math is right. So I've got my 5-year anniversary, and yeah, that's the only legal work I've ever done.
Well, tell me this. Did you decide that you were going to be a solo from the get-go because you wanted to be a solo, or is it because that was your best employment option, so to say, or?
Yeah. So what happened with me, and when I was graduating Cooley in Michigan, they have a good hands-on program, but it's not a big-name school. It's not the type of school that an employer looks at and says, "Oh wow, we have to have you for a big fancy firm." And obviously, it's in Michigan, and my wife and I wanted to live in Arizona, so we moved out here. Didn't have any connections, and this was start of '09 when the economy was pretty much cratering and pretty much nobody was hiring. So I kind of knew that the big firms were never going to be lining up to hire me. My grades weren't that great. I wasn't at the bottom of my class, but I was in the competitive running, as I like to say, for the bottom of the class. Grades were tough. I tried hard. It's just, Cooley, everything, 100% of our grade was an exam. So my grades weren't great, and I knew that was going to be an issue for big firms. And so that was part of it. When I moved out here, I couldn't even get work at the PD's office because, for every spot they'd have several hundred applicants, public defenders. So didn't really have a choice. When I started my own practice, I was working at a bakery loading bread trucks in South Phoenix because that was the only work I could get. And I kind of knew I had to do something else. Obviously don't want to be loading bread trucks for the rest of my life. So started my own practice. I kind of wanted to. The thought always appealed to me. I grew up in an immigrant family. I was born and raised in Russia, so small business ownership and going out on your own and trying something always appealed to me because that's what my parents did. We came over when I was 8.
Well, yeah. One of the themes of your book that struck me early on, because it's early in one of the early chapters, is that you suggest that you are responsible for your own success, and that's fairly obvious. But a lot of times I'll tell students that everything they've ever learned they've taught themselves, and that they need to take responsibility for their own legal education, and that they need to take responsibility for learning how to go out and be a good lawyer. Now, that's not to diminish what law professors do and what mentors could do straight out of law school, but the notion that it's your job and your responsibility is one that really hit home with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell my student, and I think part of it is kind of generational or societal or whatever you want to call it, that, people think, or you graduate law school and you get your bar card, somehow you're entitled to a job, or, the market owes you something, or, I joke with my students that they're not snowflakes of individuality, that, that every job they're applying for, there's a ton of people applying for, some more qualified, some with better connections. Someone's relative might work at a firm, so they'll have a better opening to get in. So yeah, people are definitely responsible for their own success. That's one of the good things. One of the best things about this country is that you get an opportunity. So Cooley gave me an opportunity, which I'm always thankful for. But yeah, when my students go out and they don't get a job, a lot of the time they're surprised, and I tell them you shouldn't be surprised. Phoenix prosecutor's office last year had an opening, and for one spot they had over 200 applicants. Out of those 200, probably 150 were qualified. So it's difficult out there, and I want to stress to your students and stress to my own students, it is difficult out there, and you're not guaranteed success if you do everything right, but you have a much better shot at it. And I can't guarantee you success, but I can guarantee failure. If you sit at home and do nothing. Again, if one of your relatives owns a large law firm, congrats. You're probably going to be okay. But for the 99% of law students whose dad or mom doesn't own a law firm, you need to get on it.
Well, other than of course buying your book, what would you suggest to law students to what can they do to take responsibility for their own success? I mean, obviously doing as well as you possibly can do in law school is a plus. But it's not, as we've just talked about, it's not like it was when I came out of law school in 1988. And I think, Ernie, you came out, what, a year before that?
I came out in 1985.
Oh, 85, 2 or 3 years before me.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point, the whole key to getting a job was to being on law review, being in the top quarter of your class at least, and then the jobs were aplenty. Now even those people are having difficulty getting jobs. So I really think, in a way, grades are, and this is kind of sad to say, less important than they were 20 years ago for getting a job, because the grades won't do it for you anymore like they did in a previous generation of lawyers. So what do you suggest people could do to take the reins of their own success and get themselves a job and to succeed as a lawyer?
Yeah, so I think the old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is true in the practice of law as it is in any field. And, I don't care if you're a surgeon or a roofer or a plumber or a lawyer, knowing the right people is going to get your foot in the door and get you opportunities. And this goes back to, getting off your couch and, knocking on a few doors. So one of the best things students can do is, I don't like the word networking, but I think it's a very important word. As far as getting out and meeting attorneys. I use the word hustle a lot, that, to me, when I'm hiring an associate or an intern, their ability and willingness to hustle is a lot more important than what they got in wills or secure transactions. In law school, I had to take class on secure transactions. I don't know what a secure transaction is. So for me, when I'm hiring somebody in my criminal defense practice, and my practice is 100% criminal defense, so how somebody did in civil procedure 2 or secure transactions, has limited interest to me. How much you volunteered for other attorneys, how much you volunteered for me, how many times did you email me, that kind of stuff's important. And I think most attorneys are willing to help younger attorneys, but, like myself, I have 7 jobs and I teach and I write. So I'm not going to go out and look for students to help because, I've got other stuff that I have to do to, pay bills and make money. I'll help students when they come to me, and I mentor a lot of students, I tutor a lot of students, I work with a lot of students, but I work with the ones that come to me, over and over, and will email me and invite me to lunch, we'll make that effort. One of my favorite stories a couple months ago was I was teaching a law office management class, and then first day of class, student comes up to me and says, "Can I have a letter of recommendation?" And I look at him, I say, I don't even know your name. And I tell him that, come to court with me, I'll get to know you, I'll be glad to, I've written lots of them before and be glad to do it. So he emails me in about a day or so and says, what do I have to wear to court? And I say, well, you don't have to wear a jacket, but at least a tie. And he goes, well, I don't have one. And I go, okay, go buy one. He's like, what do you want me to do? He emails me later and says, I don't need you as a reference anymore.
Yeah, geez.
Yes.
That does not exhibit the hustle that you would expect of someone.
So, now I remember that student. But, and then I have other students that, will work full-time, that'll have families, that'll still volunteer to do legal research for me or case research or come to court with me. I had an intern a couple terms ago. He was an officer in the Army at the Air Force Base here in Phoenix, Luke Air Force Base. So he would work all day, and then he would use vacation time to come to court with me to volunteer. And then in the evenings or whenever he had time, he would come to work with me. And then after a while, he started working nights, or was already working nights, I don't remember. So he would work all night and then come to court with me whenever he could. That to me is attractive. That to me shows, someone's ability to work hard. So when I have two students applying for an externship and one has, all A's, but, has never volunteered to come to court, has never volunteered with any attorneys, and I have another one that's, willing to work nights, that can come to court with me, that, their grades may be a little bit worse, the person who has that ambition, means a lot to me. Just because of my own background, I know that my grades haven't correlated to my success in practice.
And it's just like that old adage about if you want to get some work done, find a really busy person, because those are the people who know how to get work done. Speaking of that, of just kind of getting work done, getting things done, being productive, can you describe for us a little bit about your workflow on a typical day? And I know, of course, for a practicing lawyer, unless you're sitting in your office doing title work, there is no typical day. But
right.
How would you describe, as typically as you can, what a work day is like for you, and how you make it productive?
Yeah, so, the good and the bad about having your own practice is that you have to be self-motivated because, like today is a rare day that I didn't have court. So, I could have just watched Netflix all day and I wouldn't have a boss or somebody, coming in and saying, hey, stop watching Netflix, work on the whatever motion. So you have to motivate yourself. Did we lose you?
Oh, no, I'm still here.
Okay, cool. Your picture disappeared for a sec. So you have to motivate yourself. So if you can do that, and one of my big things is that having your own practice isn't for everybody. I think for some people it's the best thing in the world, and it's been great for me. But you have to know yourself. Like our friend Socrates said, you have to know yourself, that it's not for everybody. But as far as a typical day, so I have a number of contracts with cities. For your students that don't know, a lot of the cities or municipalities or counties will have contracts that they give to private attorneys. So when students think of like public defenders, they normally think of somebody that works for the county and you're there full time. So what a lot of public defenders will do is that they'll have contracts. So for example, I have a contract with the city of Scottsdale, among others. So the judge will appoint me to a case when somebody can't get their own private attorney, what we call indigent, fancy speak for poor. Most of your students probably know that, but so the judge will say you're appointed to this case, and then I'll represent that defendant. But instead of the defendant paying me, the court will pay me. So as a practicing attorney, it's nice because I know with contracts I'm guaranteed to get paid a certain amount from the city or county or whatever government agency. So the pay is not as good as private cases, but it's a lot better than nothing. So the goal is to have more private cases. And obviously some contracts pay a lot better than others, and that's a different issue. So I have certain set days when I'm in certain courts. So for example, on Tuesdays, I have a Mesa contract, one of the outlying cities here in Maricopa County. It's not a suburb, but a adjacent city to Phoenix. So like every Tuesday, I have pre-trials there in the morning. So I get assigned cases from the judge or the court, and every week I get a docket. So like for tomorrow morning, I think I have like 13 or 14 people set for the morning. And those are pre-trials. So I'll go over their cases with them. Some will plea and the case will be done. Some will need more time. Some will want to go to trial. So that's the morning. Then in the afternoon, I've got a couple non-juries. As your students probably know, non-jury is just a regular trial, but instead of a jury deciding it, a judge decides it. So that's tomorrow. Friday, I have a Phoenix contract, so Friday's my Phoenix pretrial day. So I'm there kind of all day. And this week's kind of light. I've got a few private cases, but again, like today was nice. I didn't have court, so I teach in the evenings, Mondays and Wednesdays. So today I reviewed some cases, talked to a few clients. So the nice part is that you make your own hours. So for me, you know, one of the worst things for me imaginable would be like sitting at a desk or a cubicle with a boss standing over me saying, you know, do research on construction defect law or bird law or whatever. You know, that to me would be not what I want to be doing. To me, you know, I like being in court. I like talking to prosecutors, defense attorneys, sometimes clients, depending on the clients. You know, I like driving around, even though it's a little hot out now. So, you know, to me, that's why I like criminal defense. But going back to knowing yourself, you know, if you're happy sitting at a desk all day, you know, you probably don't want to be a defense attorney. So, you know, going back to your question, it varies a lot. You know, some weeks will be long and I'll have a lot of hours, and like tomorrow I'm going to be in court for, you know, about 10 hours. No, my math is off. 8, something like that. But it varies a lot. But again, that flexibility, you know, for me is really nice as far as like if I want to take a vacation or a trip. I just got back from speaking in Michigan at Cooley, so, you know, I took 3 days off, you know, not having to ask anybody. About a month ago, we were in the Mediterranean with my wife, you know, doing stuff like that and not having to ask somebody. You know, for me, it's pretty great.
So, Alexander, let me ask you a question about technology. What role would you say that using technology and being familiar with some of the tools that you can use to make your practice easier has played a role in your development of your practice?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think technology's been one of the great equalizers for solo attorneys and small attorneys. You know, and I think technology always kind of has that effect that, you know, it makes life easier in a lot of ways for people. So, you know, one of the biggest and most obvious things is just like my laptop. So I'm an Apple person because my wife converted me. So I run my whole practice from my little laptop, you know, that I'm talking to you now. So, you know, as far as overhead, that's another one of my big things is, you know, you used to have, you know, these big desktops and big printers and fax machines. You know, now I don't even have a fax machine, so I'll either fax stuff from one of the courts if I really have to. But pretty much
Ernie, you can tell him how happy that is.
Yeah, Dane doesn't like fax machines. He's very down on fax machines.
Yeah.
I had somebody call me today and ask me for my fax number, and I said, "What? Do you want to fax something back to 2002?"
Right.
I just don't understand anybody. I'm very glad that you've held the line on that, and you're just going to do all email PDFs.
Yeah, so like I think I have to send like 1 fax a month. One of my contracts, we have to like send in like our caseload numbers, and we have to fax it in. Which I don't know why, you know, a lot of courts are stuck in their old ways, so I have to send 1 fax a month. So, you know, I don't like it, but, you know, another one of the big lessons for students is, you know, if somebody tells you to jump through a hoop, you jump through a hoop, you know, if they're paying you. So, you know, this court pays me well, they say they want it faxed, you know, I fax it in. But Ernie, going back to your question, you know, I do everything from my laptop or my phone. So like my phone, I've got a little cheap app for sending PDFs. So it just uses the phone, just my little iPhone. So it just uses the camera, and I use it probably a couple times a day. So like I'll send discovery to clients on it, you know, if it's like just 1 or 2 pages. If it's something longer, I do have an all-in-one scanner or printer. And I scan it to a thumb drive and then email it, or just scan it directly to the computer. But you know, it's so like another thing with technology is cell phones. You know, for a long time, you know, and again, as you gentlemen know, a lot of the legal profession is very stale and stuck in, you know, whatever century that they're stuck in. So just one example is like an office phone, right? So, you know, you think of a lawyer, you think of an office phone. I don't have an office phone. I just have a second cell phone. I call it my burner, which is, what drug dealers refer to as their disposable phones. And I have it through, I think, like Virgin Mobile, and I pay, I think, $30-some a month for unlimited minutes. So not only is it saving me money because, a traditional phone setup for like a regular office can easily be a couple $100 a month. So it's not only saving me, close to thousands of dollars a year, but it's also a lot more convenient. So again, last week or 2 weeks ago when I was in Michigan, I just brought my little cell phone and I was still able to call clients back.
So Alex, why do you need a second cell phone? I mean, I'm with you. I've got my Apple iPhone, and I use Google Voice for voicemail that rolls over from this just so I can get it via email. But I don't really feel the need for a second line or a second phone. So I'm just curious why one phone is not enough.
Yeah, short answer, I represent a lot of crackheads.
Okay. Alleged crackheads.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish it was alleged. So if I give them my cell phone number, they'll call, the middle of the night, weekends. So I like having that separate phone. Also, I like being able to turn it off. So, most days I'll turn it off at some point in the afternoon, sometimes earlier, and then it just goes to voicemail for the rest of the day. So, for me, not being able to be reached, certain evening hours or weekends, it's more important than, the potential new client that I might get. Also, with the cell phone, it keeps a good track of who calls because a lot of my clients like to lie to the court. So, I'll get from the judge, Mr. Benikov, client so-and-so has said you haven't called. And, I can open the little flip phone and say, look, this is the date I called you. So I know a lot of defense attorneys that will give out their private cell phone number, and a lot of it depends on your clientele. If you're representing mostly Scottsdale business people, they're probably going to expect your cell phone. A lot of my clients are court-appointed and alleged crackheads, so I don't want them having my own cell phone number. And it's cheaper, so that's kind of the short explanation. Plus, I like being able to say I have a burner phone. Did I answer the question about technology?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think that we kind of focus a lot on technology. I focus a lot on technology, but I think technology is actually secondary to what lawyers do, which is, I mean, they have to solve problems, and they have to ask good questions, and they have to figure out how to gather information that helps them solve problems and ask good questions. And I think that's really the key thing. And if technology can help you do that, that's great, and it can. But I think it's great that you've got some practical examples of how it helps you in your practice, because obviously you're doing the classic thing of solving problems and figuring out how to maneuver the case, and that's really the most important thing. And I like that your book emphasizes that really above technology, but the book, for me, what I liked about it was similar to Dane, is that you take a look at how things are changing in the practice of law and also things that haven't changed, which are you have to work hard, and you can't just assume that people are going to give you the easy road. So, you talked about the transition and being solo and comparing that to, say, joining a firm if you had that option. And you said that joining a firm, while it might seem like a good thing, there are kind of some hidden risks. And I was wondering if you could address that topic as well.
Yeah, either firm or government work, a lot of them have the same perils. And I'll use my friend as an example. He's actually the prosecutor in one of the towns that I have a contract in. He's been with the firm for about 5 years, and he was happy to get the job when he graduated, and now he's at a certain salary. I guess I'm not using his name, so I can say he's making about $85,000, which for Phoenix, for a small firm, it's okay. But he can't. Well, I guess it's actually Phoenix. I think the average lawyer pays about 60, so he's doing okay. The problem he's having is that he wants to leave the firm because he doesn't like it. It's a pretty small firm. They have maybe like 5 or 6 attorneys. So he wants to leave that firm, but he's already kind of stuck, even though he's in his mid-30s. The reason he's stuck is because if he leaves, his paycheck's going to go from 80 or 85, whatever it is, to 0. and then he's going to have to bring it back up. So he's kind of stuck because he's, has his mortgage, his car payment, his expenses, all the things that have come with that certain paycheck. And again, the $80,000 doesn't matter. It could be $200,000, it could be $50,000. You're, kind of get accustomed to a certain income, certain lifestyle. And then once you go out on your own, it's going to drop off. It might drop off a cliff, it might drop off a little, but unless you have a perfectly smooth transition, which is unlikely, it's going to drop off. So a lot of people are scared of that. So maybe you've got a couple kids that you didn't have before. Maybe a nicer car payment, mortgage, country club membership, whatever lawyer things you're supposed to have. So in a lot of ways, I think it's easier to go out sooner because I think one of the big benefits is that you have less to lose. So I started my own practice. I was, I think, 26, 27. I didn't have anything. I was broke. I had student loans. So that really there was nothing for me to lose because I figured if my practice failed, I didn't have anything and I'd be back to not having anything. I think if I would have started my own practice, in my 40s or something like that, it would have been more difficult. With government work, you get, what a lot of government attorneys will call golden handcuffs, is that, maybe your pension vests, if you walk away, you might be losing some of your retirement, you may be losing your benefits. So, and I understand it's hard to walk away, especially if you've been at a city for a while, you've got a comfortable salary, you've got comfortable hours, a lot of government work, you're not, putting it mildly, working super hard, which, is obviously can be a benefit. And so, with firm work or government work, I think, some firms especially, they have a very strict promotion system, how long you've been there, who you know. So it doesn't seem very democratic, and government work's even worse. I know a lot of people very high up in government offices that are very incompetent at their job, but will have those jobs just because they've been there a long time. In private practice, it's very democratic because the people that make the more money work harder. So that's one of the things that I like, is that in private practice I feel like I'm kind of in control of my own destiny, and a big part of that destiny is the income. So I know that if yeah.
Now, I was going to say, Alex, so, we were talking a little bit about technology, and you probably saw when Ernie spoke that, Ernie, speak up so we can look at your little banner at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, I'm speaking up now, and I have my paperlesschase.com banner.
Yeah, it looks very nice.
So he runs a blog called paperlesschase.com. I've been paperless since 2005, since Hurricane Katrina disrupted lawyers down here in New Orleans. So that's my question to you. Paperless law practice, is it the superlative way to practice or the only way to practice?
Well, so my practice is a little different in that more of my cases are misdemeanor cases. So what that means is that, my typical DR or police report, maybe a couple pages or like 2 pages. So a lot of the time, like, they'll just put it in my inbox at the court. So sometimes it's, it's faster for me just to hold on to those couple sheets of paper than it would be to scan them. So, if I have a case with more, or like if I get email discovery, then it's really nice because then I don't have to print it out. So it's definitely nice, but I would warn students to, as far as paperless or with paper, do what saves you the most time. In most cases, you're right, that's going to be paperless. But, there are a few instances, where it may not be faster. So, do whatever is simplest for you that makes the most sense. And, again, I think most of the time that will be paperless. And the whole technology, sorry, go ahead.
So I was saying, so what do? You get those 2 pages of the police report in a misdemeanor case, and you go do an appearance for your client, and then you've got that paper in your hand. And what do you do with it then?
Usually, like, I use like the really cheap little like manila folders. I actually have a color-coded system for courts, just because I spend a lot of time in court. And I actually probably should be better. I know I have a couple attorney friends that just use their iPads now, and we'll just use like the notes program to keep track of what they do with each case.
Hey, Ernie, is there anything you could do for Alex here?
Well, I mean, I would say if your friends are using iPads, and follow them and see what they're doing. I mean, I'm not as militant about getting rid of all paper. And Dane and I, we spar with this sometimes. You know, he plays bad cop and I play good cop. And I agree with you, Alexander. You know, whatever saves you the most amount of time is what you should do. And obviously, somebody who's tech savvy and not reluctant about technology like you, you're not going to resist it for any reason other than it's not saving you time. So, you know, sometimes you have to push yourself a little bit. Maybe the iPad would, you know, be beneficial to you, but I mean, you know, it sounds like you're pretty efficient as it is. So I don't have any. You get a 9 from the American judge.
Right. So what? I mean, where do you store all your paper? I mean, I used now again. I'm a full-time law professor, but I have a part-time practice, and my practice is I mean, believe me, I've done the crackhead thing before, and I still have some criminal clients, but I'm mostly representing lawyers and judges in disciplinary matters. So it's more paper intensive than your practice, and when I before I was paperless, I had big file cabinets in my office. And if you practice mostly out of your house, I presume.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually gave up my physical office. I had a physical office, so I started out in a virtual office, and that worked well. I had that for about a little less than 2 years, and that worked really well, and that's something that I would tell students to look into. There was a receptionist, and it was basically like a local call center. So the clients would call in, and on the computer in the receptionist area, it would say like who they were calling for. So it would show, you know, calling for lawyer Alex, and then they would answer the phone, hello, welcome to the office of Alex. So it looked like I had my own assistant, which was nice, and then they signed for my mail. So it was basically a combination of like UPS box and a call center, and it was pretty cheap. It was, I think, about $200 a month. Then I had an opportunity with 2 attorney friends. They wanted me to share an office with them, and I talk a lot more about office sharing, and you guys probably do too, but it's exactly what it sounds like. You share an office with some attorneys, and the arrangement we had is that I would cover their cases a little bit for them every month. I would do 6 hours a month, and at that point it was great for me because I still had enough free time that I could, you know, easily spare 6 hours a month. And so they gave me a free office, and I used their paralegal and their copier and everything. And the 2 attorneys, one did criminal and immigration, the other one just did criminal, so I was the 3rd attorney. And I was there for almost 3 years. But what I found with the office is that I would kind of force myself to go there just because it felt like, you know, that's what lawyers do. They go to offices. And then I would, you know, sit there and say, I'm not really doing anything. I'm not being productive because, you know, I'm just sitting here, but I could be, you know, at home, you know, doing this a lot easier and quicker, and then, you know, taking a nap, which, you know, I like to do.
Ernie, that sounds very similar to your experience with Launchpad, which you did in downtown New Orleans, kind of one of those large virtual office type sharing situations. But you had the same experience, didn't you?
Yeah, when I left the mid-sized New Orleans firm doing commercial litigation, my goal was to not commit to any leases or not commit to anything that I would be obligated to for over time. And I had clients, and they didn't care if I worked from home or where I worked, so I did work from home. And that was great until my kids came home from college and, you know, would pester me and interrupt me and generally make noise and mayhem. And I realized I had to go somewhere to get an office, and that's when Launchpad opened up, and it's what's called a co-working space. So you could rent space by the week or by the month, and you could get office space, or you could just get a place to plop down. And I worked my way through all of those different choices, and it was great. You met a lot of different people. I think what I liked about it was, as opposed to what a lot of my lawyer friends did, where they would go to an office space and an office sharing arrangement with other lawyers, I liked that I was one of only 2 or 3 lawyers there, so I got business from people there, and then we traded services, and it was just a lot more fun for me to work there than from home.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and
also
I think
you realized that you could get most of the work that you wanted to get done at home, and you didn't even really need the office space.
Yeah, I gave it up. I gave it up just because at that point, once I'd met people and I, you know, had that era, then I really just wanted to save time and work from home, and that's what I've been doing for a number of years now, and I like it. Every once in a while I miss Launchpad, but the great thing about a place like Launchpad is I could go back there and work for a week if I wanted to.
Yeah, and one of my big things with students is turning a weakness into a strength. So a lot of students are reluctant to not have a physical office because they're worried their operation is going to seem amateurish or unprofessional. So they're reluctant to say that I work out of my house. But the flipping it and making it a positive. So instead of telling your client that, hey, my practice sucks, I don't have money, that's why I'm working from home. I'll explain to them that, hey, I don't have an office because I can afford to charge you less because clients understand that's overhead. Or, say you're doing like an estate planning practice, instead of having, obviously most estate planning clients are going to be older, right? So like Phoenix right now, it's, 110 degrees out. A lot of older people don't want to get out. They don't want to drive. So say, as part of my service, I'll come to your house. Don't say, that I'm working from home and can't afford an office. Say that it's, a benefit that I offer. One other thing. Yeah.
My view on offices has been this. Historically, lawyers had to have offices because they had to have somebody to do their typing, since lawyers didn't know how to type. So they needed to go there for the typing. They needed to go there for the law library because that's where the law was. Right. They needed to go there to meet clients, and they needed some physical place to kind of push their paper and store their files. So for me, I work out of my house. And I've got a university office where I don't really do my private work out of there, I do my university work. But the only thing that I need an office for, since I don't have any paper, since I don't have a secretary that I need to type for me, since I don't need to store files, or I don't need a law library because the law library is online, the only thing I need an office for is to meet with human beings. And you can do that at a lot of other places other than at a home office. Now you can do it at a home office, and as long as it's professionally set up, I don't think there's anything disgraceful about it.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do meet with some clients at my house. When I meet with my criminal clients, I meet with them at the federal courthouse. They have an attorney conference center, and the clients have to walk through a metal detector to meet you.
Right.
That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so as far as meeting, clients different places, so, 100% of my clients are criminal clients, and I kind of equate it with, you're meeting with your knee surgeon, and, you can meet him or her, at their office, and you know that they're a surgeon, you're not worried that they're pretending to be a surgeon, but it's not the same as meeting them at the hospital when they have scrubs on and, maybe have some blood on it and, just physically came out of surgery. So I think with lawyers, it's a little bit the same. So when I'm meeting a potential DUI client, I can meet them in an office, and they know that I'm an attorney. But when they meet me in court, and I have a suit on, and I say, hey, I just got out of this trial, but there's a conference room, I got to get back. My jury's coming back, but I wanted to make time to talk with you. I think that makes a good impact. Or if you meet them in a coffee shop outside of the courthouse. Because most of my clients aren't super educated as far as what lawyers do. So they judge me by my clothes, my shoes, my appearance, stuff like that. They're not reading my briefs and my motions. To say, hey, I read your appeal that you did. It's really good. They're looking at my shoes and deciding if I'm a good lawyer. So I think the presentation part can be important too.
So Ernie, sometimes I start thinking that perhaps we do emphasize the role of technology in the practice of law, maybe too much, and there still is a lot of many of the skills that lawyers need to know are just kind of old-fashioned skills about getting out there and dealing with people, doing hard work, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because to date, our class has been largely about paperless lawyering, using Adobe Acrobat, and we have other sessions that are coming up in the future that deal with other technology issues, time and billing, and I know Alex used the same thing I use, which is QuickBooks Online. But at the end of the day, you still have to be a lawyer. You still have to be someone who is very good at with people, who can make cogent arguments, who can cut to the chase and get the client's work done and get a successful result.
Yeah, so the great part about being a lawyer is the difficult part. Nobody really comes to you on a good day. Again, my surgeon analogy. I think the reason people look up to surgeons is because they do something that most people can't do. Nobody goes to a surgeon when everything's good. You fell on some rebar, you need surgery. You have a tumor. Something's probably gone horribly wrong. So when somebody comes to me or most other attorneys, it's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to them. They got charged with a DUI. Their kids are being taken away because somebody said they hit them. They got in an argument with their girlfriend, and now they might get fired from their job because they have an assault charge. Again, that's the good and the bad. I'm sure, digging a ditch doesn't take the emotional toll that, my work takes, but it also doesn't have, the interest part that, you get to help people and you get to help them solve their problems. It's important to remember that you're not a social worker. You're not there to fix people's lives, because most of my clients have incredibly dysfunctional lives and have problems that they had long before they got arrested. But if you can help them in that one instance, if you can help them to not get deported, or get them to not lose their job, or get them out of some charge where somebody made something up, and I understand that about 98.9% of my clients are guilty, and that's a low estimate. I'm not one of those true believer defense attorneys that thinks the cops are framing everybody, that the judges are out to get everybody. But you get people the best outcome possible under the circumstances. But yeah, I mean, as much as the profession has changed, I think mostly it's the market that's changed, and how in employment. I think essentially the work that lawyers do is pretty much the same. People come to you and have a problem, whether they're being sued, whether they want to adopt a kid, whether a barrel fell on their head. I don't know if barrels fall on people, but I'm assuming they do. I think that was the case from Pro, maybe. I remember a barrel falling on somebody's head. That, essentially it's the same. Shameless plug here, my new book, Client Management for Lawyers, that's what it deals with. An attorney that's competent, or even more than competent, has to be good with people. And I don't care if you're doing criminal practice, civil practice, if you're at a firm, if you're a prosecutor, if you're a PD, you still deal with people. You may be at a big firm stuck in a basement, you may not get to meet with a lot of people, but most attorneys, they deal with judges, they deal with opposing counsel, and you have to be good with people. I tell my students that if you have to choose between being knowledgeable and being likable is more important. And a lot of my students are kind of shocked by that, because you spend 3 years in law school learning how important it is to know everything. And obviously you want to be knowledgeable. Of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't know the law or know what you're doing, but I know a lot of attorneys that have made a lot of money off being likable that aren't very good lawyers at the lawyering part, but they're good at the business part and they're good at the people part. Obviously you want both, but I can't stress how important it is that judges like you, that bailiffs like you, that clerks like you, that opposing counsel like you. So I don't deal with opposing counsel, I deal with prosecutors, which I guess in a way are opposing counsel. And basically my job is to go to prosecutors and ask them for favors. That's essentially what I do when I'm asking for a better plea. A lot of my defense attorney friends, or some of them, will go to the prosecutor and yell at them and throw papers and then say, okay, give me a better plea. And to me, why would somebody do a favor for you when you're yelling at them? And that's, basic people skill. That's, managing, clients, managing with other people. Some students and some attorneys are good at it naturally. Others have to work at it, but it's incredibly important.
So one of the things you said. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Ernie, you got any? We probably ought to start wrapping up, and I was just wondering if you had any kind of last lines of questioning for Alex here.
Yeah, I just had one question, and that is, we've been talking about solo practice basically, because Dane and I and you all practice solo. And I guess one of the downsides, which you mentioned in your book, is that there's no one there checking your work, and sometimes you get into tricky ethical situations. So how have you handled that in your practice when you are not clear exactly what to do? And I guess this probably came up earlier in your practice more so than now.
Yeah, and it still comes up. I was speaking at Michigan, and one of the students had a question. He's asking, what can I do to be the best lawyer out there when I start? And I kind of laughed, and I told them, you're not going to be the best lawyer when you start. Your goal should be to not be the worst. But 99% of the lawyers out there are going to have more experience than you when you start. And students need to be realistic about that. That you're not going to know a lot of what you're doing, when you're new. And people will cut you more slack as far as prosecutors, opposing counsel, bailiffs. But again, it depends on your approach. If you walk up to a bailiff and say, "Hey, I'm a lawyer, you're a bailiff, pull that file for me because I'm important," that's not going to go well. But if you come up to the bailiff and say, "Hey, I'm new, I've never been to this court, I don't know what I'm doing, please help me," 9 times out of 10, they'll bend over backwards to help you. Specifically to your question, I think having mentors is important, having other attorneys that you can go to. So like when I started, one of the hard things for me was pricing cases. What do you charge for this DUI or this assault or this, car theft, whatever. So I would talk to other attorneys and, they'd say, well, I would try to get this, but, lowest you should take is this. Then I would talk to another attorney and they'd say, yeah, that sounds about right. But you're gonna make mistakes. Again, that old joke, you're not a real doctor until you've killed somebody. You're gonna have screw ups. You're gonna have issues. You're gonna do stuff wrong. Most of it's gonna be harmless. We hope that all of it will be harmless. So like the Arizona State Bar, which I'm assuming most state bars will have, we have an ethics hotline. Do you guys have anything like that? I'm assuming.
We do have an ethics advisory service that does give hotline type advice, yeah.
Yeah, so like I've used that a couple times because you're going to have millions of different situations that you've never had before, and you may run it by one of your mentors or attorney friends, and they may not know. So the hotline services are good because you can call and they give you an anonymous advice. So you can say, I've got a client that wants to leave his bloody knife in my office. What can I do? Well, most of the time it's going to be more subtle than a bloody knife in your office. But get that help. Again, when you're new, people are going to expect you to have questions. People aren't going to expect you to know everything. So have mentors, use the hotline. Read the rules. A lot of lawyers, they finish professional responsibility, never look at the rules again. Again, with technology, they're pretty easy to pull up. You don't need to buy the rule book. Just Google your state and professional responsibility rules. It's pretty simple. And, most of the rules are straightforward, but there's always going to be, some complication that you haven't had before. Just ask questions of people you trust.
Well, Alex, last question. We've enjoyed your book, Starting a Law Practice and Professionalism for New Lawyers. I understand you have another book. Is it out yet in print, or is it just in the final proofs stage?
No, it's out. It has its own website. It's clientmanagementbook.com, all one word, clientmanagementbook.com. What it is, it's basically a collection of everything that I've learned about working with clients. It's on the criminal side and the civil side. And it's based around 30 hypotheticals where, client walks into your office and says they want their money back. Client walks into the office and says you're doing a poor job. And just 30 different hypos involving clients, wanting you to subpoena a witness that you don't know if you should subpoena or they don't have any merit to them. And then I kind of give my own hypothetical answer, to what I would do or what other attorneys would do. There's a chapter in there called Advice from Attorneys Smarter Than Me that, I talked to some attorneys that have been practicing longer than I've been alive, what advice they would give to newer attorneys starting out, working with clients. Because for me, the client management part is the hardest. It's not that hard to learn to use a calendar or to look up a case. But, when a client comes to your office and says they're going to complain about you to the bar, we don't generally prepare students in law school that well. Just because it's one of those things that, you just have to go out there and learn. So I try to make that transition from law school to practicing easier for students. And so I think the book will be useful for anyone that's interested in working with clients, and most students will be. So it's clientmanagementbook.com, and then if anybody has any questions, feel free to give out my email or office number to any of your students. I think you guys have that, so if anybody has any questions for me about solo practice, about starting out or anything like that, I'm always glad to talk to students.
Well, very good. Well, Alex, we very much appreciate it. This has been a useful session, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much. We'll talk soon.
All right, bye
All
now.
right. Take care.
Thank